I'm your shorter than average girl from down under, and today we're going to look at the original animated horror story, Pinocchio. And I'm just kidding, Pinocchio isn't actually a horror, but it should be.
They never come back as boys.
I love this movie. It was wholesome, it was disturbing in a good way.
Boys!
And I thought it was a beautiful reflection of what it means to live. So Pinocchio is based off a series of short stories by Carlo Collodi. I hope I'm saying that right. Which follows this puppet's adventure through life and the lessons that he learns day to day. Things like the attributes and characteristics one needs to be a good person and the people that you should hold on to in life. However, because it's meant to be serialized short stories for a local kids magazine, the stories of Pinocchio don't actually have like this one distinct goal at the end, but rather a whole bunch of morals scattered throughout this slice of life of a puppet named Pinocchio. And this doesn't really work for a standalone movie. With this kind of storytelling, you do need a issue that wants to be resolved or a set goal that the protagonist needs to reach to. And so many concepts were added to the Disney adaptation, taking inspiration from different moments in the short stories. And some were completely made up in the movie. But I don't mind. I actually thought how Disney handled it was nice. Giving Pinocchio a quest and like a final boss to beat only reflected his growth throughout the entire movie. I personally found the changes justifiable to kind of create this standalone story which can be adapted into a movie. So today we'll only be focusing on the 1940 movie and not the short stories that they're based off, because there are just so many different details in there. And also we're not going to be looking at any other Pinocchio adaptation that has been made more recently.
Alive! I'm a boy and I'm alive!
But if you're here for the movie review, please click on the timestamp which is on the screen right now, or the one in the descriptions, whichever suits you best. And now, let's talk story. Once upon a time, there's this poor carpenter named Geppetto, and more than anything, he really wanted a child. So he wished upon a star for his dream to come true. And because Geppetto has brought so much happiness into the world for people, the Blue Fairy decides to make his dream come true by giving his puppet, Pinocchio, life. But the Blue Fairy tells Pinocchio that only he can make Geppetto's dream come true by actually becoming a real boy. And the way that he becomes a real boy is by being brave, unselfish, and truthful. And she gave Pinocchio a consciousness, a cricket named Jimny, so that he could help him identify right from wrong. When Geppetto wakes up, he finds that he has a son, and he's ecstatic. And so, along with Cleo and Vigoro, they become a family of 4. Geppetto tells Pinocchio that he should be going to school tomorrow, literally because.
And besides, tomorrow you've got to go to school.
Why?
Oh, to learn things and get smart.
Why?
Oh, because.
Oh.
And the next day, Pinocchio is off for his first day in the real world. And this is where Pinocchio meets Honest John and Gideon, 2 con artists which literally take Pinocchio off with them and sell him off to a puppeteer named Stromboli. Now, Jiminy does advise Pinocchio to leave and go back to school. However, Pinocchio's taken by this allure of fame and the fortune that he could bring, and so decides to work for Stromboli despite Jiminy's advice. And the theater is not a healthy environment for a child at all. There are so many things that Pinocchio is exposed to, which he shouldn't have been. But Pinocchio loves the cheers from the crowd. It made him feel special. And, that's something everyone wants, really. However, due to Pinocchio's quick success, Stromboli could not afford to lose him. And so when Pinocchio said that he'll be going back to his father, Stromboli ends up locking him up and threatening Pinocchio that he would chop him up and make him into firewood. Great boss. Now, Jimmy tries to save Pinocchio when he's locked up, but unfortunately, the lock is too rusted, and so Jimmy couldn't unpick it. So instead, he just sits and comforts Pinocchio. Now, this is where the Blue Fairy takes pity on the two of them, and so she comes to help them out. However, Pinocchio is just too ashamed to face the Blue Fairy, and so, against Jiminy's advice of telling the truth, Pinocchio decides to lie to the Blue Fairy, saying that he was abducted by monsters, and so was Jiminy, and that they forced him to be here. And what we all know about Pinocchio, every time he lied, his nose started to grow. And so the Blue Fairy says to him,
"You see, Pinocchio, a lie keeps growing and growing until it's as plain as the nose on your face."
Now this is where Jiminy jumps in and pleads that the Blue Fairy give Pinocchio a second chance. And so she does, but she says that this would be the only second chance that he gets. Because
I'll forgive you this once, but remember, a boy who won't be good might just as well be made of wood.
So Pinocchio makes it out of the clutches of Stromboli, and as he's heading home with Jiminy, he meets Honest John and Gideon again. Now this time they manage to convince Pinocchio that there's something wrong with him and that he needs a holiday. And so where is this holiday?
And I takes him to Pleasure Island. Ah, Pleasure Island. Pleasure Island?
A place where good boys have fun.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
So the absolutely evil coachman comes at midnight to sweep Pinocchio and all the other good boys off to the ferry so that they get taken to Pleasure Island. And Pleasure Island is an absolute hellhole. There are saloons for underage drinking, there are mansions just waiting to be destroyed, there are arenas and wrestling houses so that the boys can beat each other up, and damn, there's a row of these racially stereotypical statues throwing cigars for all the children. These kids think that the adult world is so much better than the innocence of childhood, and so they want to indulge in all these illegal activities and behaviors just to be cool. And this is what the coachman bets on, pretty much. He wants these kids to indulge in Pleasure Island because that's when the magical spell of Pleasure Island works on them. The more they indulge, the faster these kids get turned into donkeys. And now the coachman wants the donkeys so that he could sell them off as slaves. Now Jiminy finds out this truth and he warns Pinocchio about it. But Pinocchio, trying to impress his friends, he doesn't listen to Jiminy. He only starts to get the picture once his friend Lampwick starts to transform into a donkey in front of him, and then he starts growing donkey ears and tail, and he's like, Jiminy was right. And so they do escape Pleasure Island. Now, Jiminy and Pinocchio finally make it home, but it's empty. There's no one inside. And that's because his father, Vicoro, and Cleo have been looking for him this entire time, ever since he didn't come back from school. And so while Pinocchio was contemplating his wrongdoings, the Blue Fairy sends a message to him. And in this message, she reveals that Geppetto is still alive, but he's been swallowed by Monstro, a evil human eating whale. And so Pinocchio comes up with the idea that he's gonna go and save them all. And so him and Jiminy make it to the bottom of the ocean and they find Monstro. And then once inside Monstro, Pinocchio comes up with the genius idea of building a fire inside to make Monstro sneeze, hoping that they'll be able to get out with the sneeze. And so they do, but it makes Monstro really angry. And in the entire kerfuffle, as they're trying to make their escape, Pinocchio doesn't make it.
Oh, Pinocchio! Pinocchio!
But because Pinocchio proved himself to be brave, truthful, and selfless, he was blessed by being turned into a real boy. And so all five of them, Pinocchio, Jiminy, Geppetto, Vigoro, and Cleo, all lived happily ever after. Now, Pinocchio, it's the story of each and one of us. We're all born as these wooden puppets with the potential to become real boys through the choices that we make in life. Our parents bless us with these bodies that we have, and God blesses us with our consciousness, which then grows and learns with us. And we must use the two together, our body and our consciousness, to make the right decisions and stay on the
straight and narrow path
to actualizing our humanity. However, temptation will get in the way. And life is full of temptation. And these temptations seek to kind of divert us from this narrow, straight path that the Blue Fairy is talking about by giving us illusionary paths to success and temporary satisfaction, as we see by both the theatre and Pleasure Island. Now, both of these distract us from our true purpose and make us forget that we want to become real boys. So, in other words, good and noble human beings. Now, the movie highlights 3 ways to be able to achieve our goal: being brave, being truthful, and being selfless. However, through the adventures of Pinocchio, we can also pick up on 3 other ways for us to achieve this: being smart, being hardworking, and looking after your family. So combining these 6 takeaway messages, as well as Pinocchio's unshaken politeness throughout the entire movie, we have a pretty good formula of how we can be good and noble human beings. Now, this isn't to say that Pinocchio is without flaws. In fact, quite the contrary. And it's his flaws which make him such an interesting character, and his sacrifice at the end all the meaningful. I mean, if you just take the perfect character, when they do something heroic, it's expected. But bring in a flawed character who then performs a heroic and self-sacrificial act, well, it makes the sacrifice more noble in the eyes of the viewer, because unlike the perfect character, a flawed character is making double the sacrifice. Not only are they sacrificing themselves, their livelihood, or something that belongs to them, they're also putting down their ego and their self-loving nature for the sake of others. And the classic example of this is Vegeta's sacrifice in the Majin Buu saga. From the beginning, Vegeta is the villain, he's selfish, only self-serving. So Vegeta's final atonement came as a shock for a lot of viewers, and a surprise in a good way. And it changed how the audience viewed Vegeta from then onward. That's a story for another video, but what I'm trying to say is the same kind of logic applies to Pinocchio. Throughout the story, Pinocchio isn't really to blame for, going to Stromboli or Pleasure Island. I mean, he was impressionable and goaded by Honest John. For what Pinocchio is accountable for is the ways that he acted with Jiminy and the Blue Fairy. So let's say Jiminy to start off with. Jiminy is Pinocchio's consciousness. And yes, Jiminy isn't perfect too. But that reflects the nature of our consciousness. Our consciousness grows with us. Yes, it starts with a pre-understanding of the concepts of good and bad, right and wrong, but the way that these concepts look in the real world, well, the consciousness doesn't really know, and it's learning it as well. So it's not Jiminy's fault that he couldn't kind of stop Pinocchio from the get-go in a lot of things. But as he started to pick up that something's off, he went straight to Pinocchio and tried to help him. But Pinocchio, more than once, ignores his advice completely until it was a bit too late. So, for example, in Pleasure Island, Pinocchio only believed what Jiminy was telling him when he literally saw Lampwick turn into a donkey in front of him. And then he started to see himself changing in that way. And so Pinocchio's like, no, I don't want that to happen to me. That's not the quality of life I want. And so he started to listen to Jiminy. And a good example of this is when people start to form addictions. When someone goes into an activity, they don't automatically think, oh, I'm going to be addicted. However, signs start to show up. And so your consciousness automatically starts bringing up the red flags. But a lot of us ignore this, saying that it's not a big deal until we see two things happen. One, an example of someone that enjoys the same activity having a worse off quality of life due to that activity that they're participating in. And two, seeing ourselves falling into the same habits as that person that we saw that we don't really want to resemble. And so that's when we start to listen to our consciousness and getting clean of whatever the addiction is in our life. Another time that Pinocchio ignores Jiminy is when he ditches him and ditches school to go with Honest John and Gideon to Stromboli's theatre. When the facade of the industry collapsed around Pinocchio, that's when he started to realize that he's made a mistake. However, in this situation, it was way more difficult for Jiminy to save Pinocchio on his own. So, unlike Pleasure Island, where Pinocchio's actual actions were the ones that resulted in him being turned into a donkey, it was the outside world which had Pinocchio caged up. And our consciousness can't change the outside world on its own. It can only change us. Seeking fame and external validation through means which don't align with our own personal purpose and causes forces an individual to create a mask that they put on in public just to satisfy other people. And this mask then becomes the cage, which locks itself around who we truly are and what we truly want out of life. So our consciousness, it can help us identify this mask or cage, if you like, that we've created for ourselves. And it can even, remind us to hold on to the truth of who we truly are and where we're meant to go. But it won't be able to free us from the cage on its own. Because freeing ourselves from that cage needs some external assistance. Something which will help us remold the shape of that mask so that it's freeing. These things can be like a milestone event in your life, a person in your life that knows or is willing to accept who you truly are and helps you, or even divine intervention like Pinocchio. And so we get Pinocchio's relationship with the Blue Fairy here. The Blue Fairy is the personification of some of the attributes of a divine creator. Now, I'm not saying that the Blue Fairy is the god of the Pinocchio universe, but she reflects a glimmer of his full magnificence, if you like. Not only did she blow life into Pinocchio and give him a consciousness to help him stay on the straight, narrow path towards being a real boy. She sees what he's doing at all times, and she aids him when he's lost. But embarrassed by the fact that he didn't listen to her and he ignored Jiminy completely, Pinocchio decides to lie through his wooden teeth. Wait, does he even have wooden teeth? No, can confirm Pinocchio doesn't have teeth. So, Pinocchio decided to lie through his non-existent wooden teeth, just so that he doesn't disappoint the Blue Fairy, even though she can see everything that's happened. He put the blame on these imaginary monsters just so that he doesn't take responsibility for his actions. And that was untruthful and selfish. And so, because of this, the Blue Fairy says that she won't be able to help him again. Well, at least until he gets over this habit of lying. However, we do see that she helps him once more when she sends the letter to Pinocchio which outlines where Geppetto was. But I don't exactly think she did that to help Pinocchio, but rather to help Geppetto. I mean, we know from the beginning that Geppetto has only been good. He hasn't really done anything wrong, so why should he suffer in Monstro's belly? So, the Blue Fairy was giving Pinocchio another chance to prove himself worthy, but at the same time also helping Geppetto out through the hands of Pinocchio. And see, sometimes in life we do get offered second chances for the sake of others, if that makes sense. So, let's just say if there is one good person on this earth, it doesn't mean that everybody around them are going to be terrible because they're terrible people. But no, these terrible people are going to be given opportunities to be good because that person has been good and only deserves good in their life. And so bad people get given second chances for the sake of other good people, if that kind of makes sense.
They're the wrong things that seem right at the time. But even though the right things may seem wrong sometimes, sometimes the wrong things may be right at the wrong time, or vice versa. Understand?
Nope.
Uh-uh.
Anyways, the way Pinocchio acts towards Jiminy and the Blue Fairy can be summarized as ignoring the truth and lying. And now, scholars of ethics will tell you that the combination of ignoring the truth and lying has a name, which is hypocrisy. Now, hypocrisy means to behave or act in a way which doesn't match your true inner nature, just for the sake of enjoying some benefits of society or the social structure that you're surrounded in, which you may not otherwise have if you stood true to your self beliefs and morals. And yes, we can see the trait of hypocrisy in Pinocchio. I mean, he wants people to like him. He wants to fit in. He falls for peer pressure really easily. And I mean, he puts himself in really dangerous situations just to achieve this. And funnily enough, just as like a little religious plug, in the chapter called The Hypocrites in the Quran, it describes hypocrites as being helpless pieces of wood. And because they are. They are the wooden puppets of society, moving according to the social standards, even though it goes against their inner core and consciousness. At the end of the day, being brave to stand up for your morals, even if it's against society, as well as being truthful to yourself about where you stand and to others through the way that you act, and avoid seeking self-serving benefits. That's how one avoids the fate of being a social puppet, and to live life as a real boy on this earth. Pinocchio is truly an incredible story about purpose, the right cause, and avoiding temptations and traps of life. It's definitely a more mature story aimed for a bit more mature audience than I think they advertise it to be for. It's got alcohol, it's got smoking, it's got negative language, and unsavory references, just to say the least, which just tells us that it's not meant for a younger audience. But it's a story worth understanding because its parallels to real life are extraordinary. I hope you enjoyed that deep dive into the hidden messages behind the tale of Pinocchio. Definitely one of the more serious Disney classics out there, but we don't run away from deeper movies on this channel. If you want to catch up with the wholesome horror fest, which is Pinocchio, please make sure to use a streaming platform that doesn't support the violation of human rights or the spread of negativity into the world. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on next week's video. Don't be shy of putting any story recommendations in the comments if there's anything that you want to see reviewed or analyzed. And that's all for now. So be brave, be happy, and be kind, and we'll catch you all next time.